take this one. Unplug. Yes.
Thank you. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shanti Panditji, Dr. Mohanta, the Honorable Secretary, Honorable Srinivas Raoji, the Dean Mazarasi, the Rector, my colleagues and student friends. It's a huge honor for me to be able to share my thoughts on the language. If ma'am would kindly allow, I would like to spend 1 minute of my 5 minutes on Assamese, because that's very important for me, considering that we have very eminent guests from Assam. And since it's my language, so essentially what is my language? Because I speak Bhojpuri, Hindi, Arunachali Hindi, which is a distinct variety, and Assamese, and of course English is my language. So, and it's my language. It takes me back to a bit of a nostalgic, especially this moment makes me a little nostalgic to my days in Itanagar in 1995, where I was a student. And my first student who I taught, I mean, again, pardon me for being a little subjective and personal here. So I stayed, in a slum near MLA Cottage. If people were in Arunachal, in Itanagar, 1995, that doesn't no longer exist. And so in 100 shanties, I was looking for tuitions, obviously, as a student. And one evening, a woman whose husband was an electrician, she walks to me and she says, "Bhaiti, more Lora Swali tuition parabo paribo niki? Moi tumak tuition hisabe ratir ahar din." Which is this, that would you be able to teach my kids? Because she knew that I was looking for tuitions, and instead of money, I'll give you dinner in the evening. And for 3 years of my life, I used to wait for the dinner every day. So there's a bit of Assam in my body, in my mind. So that's why I wanted to share this. And years later, one fine day, I was in North Lakhimpur in the village. One of my friends took me there. And to my surprise, I found that I was speaking Assamese without having made any conscious effort to do so. But the languages we acquire, the languages we learn, the languages that just manifest in us as part of our beings. When it comes to English, where the story is the same, I'll be first personal and then I'll become more objective. It's also, and I know it's kind of a little complex to really talk about English, because everywhere I go I say we are proud to have Indian English. When NEP draft was proposed, I wrote an article in the Indian Express called The Enigma of English. It's a complex question. Indian English obviously is a variety of English. 1938, Raja Rao, when he wrote Kantapura, the preface, he says that you face a complex problem, because English 1938 was not an alien language. Raja Rao, Kannada writer, of course. And see that English is a language of our intellectual makeup. And when we have to express our spirit in a language which is not our own, we'll say, then there's a challenge. But can English become a language of emotional makeup? And Rao in 1938 hopes so. He says that like Irish, like American English, perhaps someday English would be an Indian language. And which is so correct. English is also a language of modernity. English is a language of emancipation. English is also a language of groups and communities who seek emancipation as such. In some places in the country, English is also celebrated as a goddess, especially people who come from the marginalized sections. Right? Dr. Ambedkar, all his great writings in English, right? Sri Aurobindo, for instance. So English is an Indian language. And because English gives you bread and butter, that's another thing. But English is also a language of consciousness in that sense. English is an intellectual language, but for English, the great Indian text would not have reached Europe. In one sense, Indian Renaissance happened in Europe. So after translation of Bhagavad Gita, all great texts, Johns, Wilkins and others, India Renaissance also happened in Europe. From Europe, obviously, and this is a time today when the Honorable Prime Minister talks about, it's also a moment of new Renaissance in India in the 21st century, where recently we talked about Shri Aurobindo. So in that sense, we have to understand Hindi, of course, English, English not only a global language, it definitely is. But it's an Indian language. It is a language where a consciousness and emotions, and what is language after all? What is language after all? If consciousness, if breath is a transformation of consciousness, if speech is a transformation of breath, then we cannot dissociate consciousness with language. And I don't have much time, obviously. I would like to read an extract from a poem by Kamala Das. In the context that English is both definitely Indian. The problem is not with the language. The problem is somewhere else. Don't blame on English. If somebody would provoke me, I say no, don't blame on English because you don't have an ability to find solutions. Don't say that. Well, English was a colonial language. As for Ireland, also English was a colonial language. They've created some great works in English. So we should look for the opportunities to do great deeds rather than blaming on a language. For some reason, historical reasons, may have been responsible in introducing distinctions, ideas, categories that continue to colonize us. Like the distinction of myth and history, which doesn't exist in India, comes from English. But then we should stop blaming English for itself and look at the great opportunities that this language has offered. So I'll just read a few lines and then thank you. She says this. I'm Indian, very brown, born in Malabar. I speak 3 languages, write in 2, dream in 1. Don't write in English, they said. English is not your mother tongue. Why not leave me alone? Critics, friends, visiting cousins, every one of you. Why not let me speak any language I like? The language I speak become mine. Its distortions, its queerness, all mine alone. It's half English, half Indian, funny perhaps, but it is honest. It is as human as I am human. Don't you see? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. May I humbly request Dr. Nani Gopal Mahanta, Education Advisor to Honorable Chief Minister, Government of Assam, to deliver the felicitation address.
Good evening to all of you. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Santosri Pandit Ma'am, and distinguished guest, particularly Dr. K. Srinivasan Rao, Secretary, Sahitya Academy, New Delhi, and my former colleague, Professor Mazhar Asif from Bharathiyar University, now Dean here in language, SLL and CS, and our other distinguished guests from various departments and also from various states of India. Well, ma'am, my sincere gratitude and thanks for having given me this opportunity to speak a few words, to speak about contribution of my language to the enrichment of Indian culture. Well, we have come here along with our Secretary Higher Education to talk about particularly signing MOU about Concord chair that we will have a meeting immediately after this conversation. Thank you, ma'am. Well, since I have been given about 10-15 minutes to talk about the contribution of my language or literary movement, I have a paper. Well, I'm not going to read it, but basically what I'm going to talk about is to, in the first I would just like to talk about the main, the 5 phases that I consider important for the growth of Assamese language and how it contributed. The first phase I would like to call it the formative phase from 1880 to 1300, which belonged to the esoteric verses of Buddhist, Saryapadas and Sanskrit, Sri Krishna Kirtan literature. That is the first formative phase. The second phase we would like to call it the pre-Vaishnavite literature from 1380 to 1550. And I do not want to elaborate all of this. This includes the composition of Han Saraswati, Madhav Kandari, some of them have been already referred to. The third phase of Assamese language I would call the Hongkori or the Vaishnavite literature from 1550 till 1630. Here the influence of Bhakti movement is very much palpable, particularly under the leadership of Mahaguru Hankardev, Madhavdev, Ananta Kandali, Ram Saraswati and others. That is the third phase. And the fourth phase, we like to call it post-Hankardev literature from 1650 to 1850, and this is the period which belonged to the writing of Buronjis, particularly Chronicles of Ahom Court. That is the writing period of Buronjis and other hagiographies. We call it Shorit Puthi about our great Vaishnavite scholars. That is the fourth phase. And the modern phase begins from, I would call it roughly from 1830. And this is the phase that we found the emergence of standard Ahomiya, which is Assamese, and which is spoken today. Here, the missionaries played a very important role under, Orunodai is one such newspaper, but I do not want to elaborate all of this. What I would like to talk about the role of Assamese, particularly in the preservation or maintenance of the ethnic mosaic of the region. Actually, my task is made easier by Professor Dr. Singh. He has talked about how the fluidity of language, particularly in the context of Northeast India in general and Assam in particular. And I always like saying that as you go from North India to Eastern India, Assam looks less and less, Assam is the last point, where India looks less and less India and more Southeast Asia. And it is said that Northeast India is anthropologist's delight, and it's a nightmare for the policymakers with more than 270 ethnic groups, 185 languages. Just to talk about Assam, if I may just give one poetic inferences. Motok Moranaru Lalung Sutia, Missing Borahi Boru Kosari Gutia, Mesrava Singfo, Dapala Habung, Ahum Keotkus, Koibutta Bangun, Pakial Kunual Aruduonia, Karbi Missimi Hari Arukoronia, Kolita Kayastar Buhai Mohanto, Pongwa Somwasa, Bonwa Ananto, Tolua Nepali, Paharia Bhai, so Kusti Jatire Milahotai. That means Assam alone is having more than 64. And not to talk about Arunachal, my friend has already talked about. Here I'd like to briefly draw your attention how Assamese help in the process of communication among those communities who do not have otherwise a common language. For example, the Rabha tribe. The Rabha tribe, although they speak their own language, but they have tremendous influence of the dominant language called Assamese. And majority, I will not say majority, but half of the Rabha, for example, population, they talk about, the loose Assamese, and it is called the Ravamis, it's called Ravamis. And particularly, the groups of Rabha, like the Pati Rabha, Dahori Rabha, Totola Rabha, Bitolia, Hondao, they do not use the Rabha language, but it's the broken Assamese. So we call it Ravamis. Then, what my friend has talked about in Arunachal. Arunachal Assamese now, of course, the Hindi is becoming dominant. But before Hindi became dominant, but even today, Assamese is it's a new form. It's called Nephamese. It's called Nephamese, where there is no dominant language in the state of Arunachal Pradesh. And what happens, when we studied in JNU, I have a friend called Ravin Hibu who happens to be the Additional Police Commissioner of Delhi. What happens, what I'm trying to talk about is the enormity of difference or diversities. I won't say differences. Diversities in Arunachal. My friend Robin, his language is not spoken by his wife, and their son, they do not know each other's language. And he speaks Tamil because they have a Tamil person that looks after their residents. So this is the enormity of language, and here, as a lingua franca, a few contact languages have emerged, particularly Nephamese, which is essentially based on Assamese. This language is now termed as Arunachali Assamese, sometimes also known as Nephamese or Orunamese, along with Hindi, that is becoming, of course, popular in Arunachal Pradesh. And another, broken Assamese, which helps to keep our various ethnic groups united, particularly in Nagaland, is Nagamese. A new language called Nagamese has evolved and is popularly used in Naga society today. It was originally pidgin of Ahomiya, but realized into a communicative medium of Naga society. The fast growth of Nagamis is due to the expansion of commercial activities, multilingual and cross-cultural contact, growth of intertribal cultural marriages and others. Some families, mainly the inhabitants of Dimapur, who have intertribal marriages, use Nagamis as their language at home. We have so many examples of such broken Assamese which are utilized by various ethnic groups of Northeast India, with about more than 270 ethnic groups. So Assamese, it acts as the dominant language, or I would say market language, that helps to communicate among those communities who otherwise do not know each other's language. Of course, there are certain situations in which, for example, in Nagaland or even in Meghalaya, there was question of alienation of those some tribal groups. They used their ethnic identity against the hegemonic cultures by a section of dominant Assamese group of people. I do not want to go into that aspect. But here I would like to draw your attention about our Bhakti movement and the role being played by Hon'ble in the integration of Eastern India's language and culture with that of India. Here I would like to mention one particular dimension, that is the first Ramayana to be translated into regional language. Uriya was talking about Mahabharata regional language, isn't it? But in Ramayana to be translated into regional language from the main Sanskrit Ramayana among the North Indian languages is Madhav Kandali's Saptakanda Ramayana in Assamese. This was carried out in 14th century. Madhav Kandali created his work under the patronage of Raja Mahamahikya, who was then the Kasari king, his kingdom being situated in the present-day district of Nagaon. Now, various scholars have demonstrated that in the early Christian era, a significant number of Aryans, although we do not use the Aryans now, they came up to Sodia and influenced the culture and religion of those areas. As Professor A.K. Barua has argued, and I quote, the Aryan influence became so widespread and penetrating that even minor Vedic customs and rituals deep-rooted in the life of the common people, unquote. Here I would like to draw your attention to the role being played by particularly Hon'ble in the medieval period. Srimanta Hon'ble was such a personality who heralded the Assamese modernity and renaissance. He was a saint scholar, dramatist, poet, singer, literature, social reformer, religious leader, sculptor, actor, dancer belonging to the 15th and 16th century, who laid the socio-cultural and religious foundation of then undivided Assam. Assam at that point of time was divided into various segments and into tiny kingdoms. Shankardev used Vaishnavism as a means to bring reforms to the society in order to popularize Ek Horam Bhagavati Dharma, that is, monotheism with supreme devotion to Vishnu or Krishna. He democratized and simplified religious practices which hitherto was inaccessible to the common masses. Shankardev established a new institution known as Patra, from which the word Kshatriya came, which was popularized by our Sanskrit department in English study, the Kshatriya culture. It is Shankardev who established this institution called Patra, through which he popularized his teaching among the people through the medium of his wide corpus of literary creations like drama, which is known as Ankiya Bhavna, songs, Borgit, and dance, which are known as Kshatriya dance. The Kshatriya dance is recognized as one form of classical dances of India. In the process, Shankardev ushered a new life, a new corpus of literature, and a new cultural state, the resonance of which still remain vibrant in all aspects of Assamese society. His creative works include a large corpus of immortal verses such as Kirtan Bukha, Nivinava Siddha Khamba, Bhakti Pradip, Haricharan Upakhyan, and 6 other Ankiya Bhavnas. The Kirtan Bukha is collection of 33 kirtans or chapters, and each chapter is described from Bhagavad Leela of Krishna or Vasudeva or Narayan from Bhagavad Puran. he composed 6 Ankiya Bhavanas by creating a new language which is known as Brajavali. Here I would like to give you an example of Brajavali language. It is actually intelligible from all the communities of the region, maybe to up till Orissa. It's called Brajavali. I just like to give you one, dialogue from a drama, Ankiya Bhavana called Ram Vijay. When he had broken in the Swayamvar, the Shivadhanu, then Parahuram was very angry. When Parahuram was very angry, Sita was petrified. Then Ram consoles Sita by saying that, Ahe Priye, Uhi Banavahi Rihira Darpa Dehiye Tuhari Traha Milayo, Uhi Hamakulagi Kuna Kudra Patanga, Zoise Hinghakulagi Baleko Horino. Then he addresses Parahuram Ram, Oye Banavahi Rihi, Tuhu Tuhara Mata, Renuka ko katiye papa asaralo, aru buhi kotha koiye hamako viti dekhao ho. Raho raho, aaj tuhako uchchito bhikkha deho. Joto phakoti thiko hamako lagi prakapi karo ho. That is Brajavali language. And this Brajavali language is actually at that point of time was intelligible to all the communities of the region. And most important, his egalitarian approach. Through Kirtan Gukha, he was trying to create a society in which he said, Nahi bhakotito jati ajati visar, Krishnara bhakotito samastare adhikar. Means, for creeds, devotion has bias none, love for Krishna is meant for everyone. Means there is no discrimination in Krishna's bhakati. Then he says, Samasta bhutata vyapi asumoy hari, habaku janiba tumi Vishnu buddhi kori. Means, in all beings as Hari I dwell, regard everyone as Vishnu, in them dwell. So that is the kind of egalitarian approach of Shankaradev. And about women, he said, Sri Hudro, Korejari Amaka Bhakati, Tahako Janiba Oti Gyana Mahamoti. Means, when on me devotion to women and folks flip and sour, then know they are in wisdom's bower. So that is the approach of Shankaradev, and in the process, he institutionalized his religion by establishing Kshatriyas in Assam to propagate his religion through the means of Borgit, Kshatriya dance, Ankiya Bhavana, Nam Kirtan. So there are more than 75 Kshatriya institutions, and through the chairman, we want that there should be more studies and research into those Kshatriya institutions and other apostles of Bhakti movement along with his language. So this is what, I have a paper, I don't want to read it out. So this is what
Thank you, sir. Now may I request Dr. Srinivas Rao, Secretary of Sangeeta Academy, to deliver your felicitation address. Before that,
we welcome Srinivas Rao. In Telugu, in Andhra, we use Karvepaku a lot.
Namaskar and good evening to all of you. So after hearing the speeches, my short note will be entirely different than this because I kept in mind about that they're opening school of languages. So keeping in mind that mind, so I made some kind of short notes so I can put it. So respected Professor Shanti Sri Panditji, I'm a scholar and also Honorable Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, Professor Nali Gopal Mahantaji, Academic Advisor to Honorable Minister of Education, Government of Assam, all the eminent scholars, writers who are participating in this event and friends. I'm very glad to be here with all of you today. Thanks to the Honorable Vice Chancellor for inviting me for this program and giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with eminent scholars like you, because I am not a scholar. And I do not know whether I am worthy of this opportunity. However, I will try my level best to repay the faith that Vice Chancellor has kept on me. Friends, India is a land of languages, literature, and most importantly, the host for rich and long tradition of indigenous knowledge systems in all the regions and languages. We all should be proud of this rich and ancient cultural heritage, and mere pride in our heritage will not help in preserving and promoting that heritage to the future generations and in other lands. All culture is preserved in language of the given society and gets promoted, and future generations pick up those cultural aspects which appeal to them and continue the practices, rituals and methods. One of the key components of this expression of culture contained in languages is manifested through literature, written or oral. Another important aspect of cultural expression and social development is the preservation and propagation of mother tongues. One may wonder, why should there be such a